So, as I was saying about Eeyore's depth of character
Yes,
and his
yes.
seminal role,
Did the roll have butter?
probably not for Eeyore.
Oh,
Everyone else
look
probably.
who's here.
Oh, hey.
Oh, hey, it's
Hi,
nice you
Dion.
guys to be joining us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. Did y'all miss that? I
Yeah.
just went on for 10 minutes about Eeyore.
Oh, it was actually riveting. Well, maybe riveting is the wrong word. I think crimping would maybe be a better word because that seems to be...
That's my style lately.
Yeah, that's the one to do. But yes, welcome everybody to What the Hell is Water. Sorry, this is a new stream and also a little late. We had tech issues and we had guests with tech issues. So we got it all figured out now. There's no biz like showbiz, as Aristotle said.
Aristotle. That guy has a lot of sayings.
He does.
Yeah, he's transcended his time for
Him
sure.
and Confucius, they just keep
and
going.
The Buddha.
You've ever heard that phrase from A to C? That's because it talks about all the quotes in the world.
Oh, I didn't know
Aristotle to Chipotle.
Confucius.
Oh,
to
Confucius.
Chipotle.
Maybe I'm
that
a
a
little
restaurant?
hungry. We talked about butter and rolls and Chipotle here. Oh man. Good morning. How are you doing today?
I am doing okay this morning. Trying to get away from using fine in my language. So I'm coming up with another just really medium term.
Well, when you say okay, in your head, do you spell it OKAY, or is it just the letter OK, or is it different based on how you're feeling?
All caps, baby.
All caps.
Okay.
Okay. Or, I mean, are there days where you're like, oh, I'm lowercase? Or maybe some days I'm superscript, okay?
Yeah.
or
right?
Subscript.
Subscript,
Yeah.
okay. Do
Or
you change your
okay
voice?
with the superscript and then
the... what do you do?
Say that again? The what?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we will just keep on rolling because so we're already a little bit behind. So we'll speed things up a little bit for today, but yesterday, we had a great episode. Do you remember it?
No, I don't.
Oh.
I had a concussion yesterday, I think.
Well, that's okay because me too. So
Okay, lovely.
Yesterday, Ryder and I both had concussions. Something about heads together. Ow. Yep.
Yeah,
And then,
it's really dangerous when you've got the kind of connection we do whenever your heads bump
it's
together.
kind of like those goats that like we're gonna compete for mating, but then there's like a crowd of people over like, what are they competing for?
Yeah, there's no one to mate with.
and they don't want to mate with
you
you anyway.
Nerds, stop it. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, so that was our episode yesterday. If you don't know what we're talking about, it's because we don't either. And there was no episode yesterday, but our previous episode was episode 79, which was at least tentatively titled Becoming Better, Working Through Mental Health Challenges and Past Trauma. And we had a special guest there. His name was Justin Corno. And he is a guy who has had a lot of past trauma in his life. He grew up a military brat, which comes with its own set of challenges as well. His brother passed when he was a teenager, and his brother was a teenager as well. And then he later found out as he went into college that he got ADHD, and he had been previously very good at school and didn't have any issues. And then when he went and he's like, I'm going to do this engineering thing. Well, what a great time to find out you have ADHD, right? When you work for engineering.
And of course, you get your life goals all set out, and then, oops, reality shows up.
Yeah, and so one of the things he talked about was, hey, the way he found out he had ADHD was he was talking with his friend, it might have even been his roommate, who did have it, and he started to describe some of the things that was going on. He's like, oh, that sounds a lot like me, and that sounds like a lot like the things that I was going through. And I thought that was a really powerful message. It's like, hey, this is one of the benefits of talking more with people who are different than you. There's a term called neurodiversity. Have you heard that term before?
No.
Yeah, so neurodiversity is like, you have some people who are, I guess, quote unquote, normal, dead middle in all the spectrums. Yeah. Say that again.
Neuronormative.
Yeah. And then you have some people who are not.
And I just made that up. But I'm sure
it sounds. It sounds
good,
right. I mean, it's got neuro in there. There's like a brain. Normative, which is like something you can't relate to.
Sounds so sciencey.
But yeah, so he found out he had ADHD, and then figured out how to work through that. And he talked a little bit about how, well, at first it was just a drugs approach, and they only didn't really even test him. And so he kind of alluded a little bit to how he wasn't the biggest fan about that, and how that can had the societal issues around that type of thing. And he also talked about how some people in college were like, oh, well, it's not fair that you got that grade on that test. Like, you should take it again without your enhancement. Because when we didn't dive into this too much, but some people actually take Ritalin and some of the drugs that are used, Adderall, for treating ADHD. Some people call them kind of like super pills, and some people use them, especially at high performing like Ivy League schools and things like that. They use it as a way to focus and get ahead. So after we talked about ADHD, we moved on to the rest of his life, where we talked about his career as an electrical engineer and an aerospace engineer. And then he moved from California to Colorado, and he went through a divorce, and now he's found a lot of support through something called a men's team. So that was a really powerful concept that I don't think a lot of people necessarily heard about. As we've talked about with Eric Wooten many times in the past, one of the core things to have solid relationships and also just to be a solid person is to have that sense of community, right? We've talked about that with Eric and without Eric many, many times, how important that is. And having a men's team is a way to intentionally have that community. And so by having that intentionality, having that community, and having the personal responsibility, this men's team was basically giving all three of those leg stools for that stool that Eric said didn't exist when he said it would fall over. Remember that one?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, Eric was a little sarcastic on that one. That was great.
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, these three things, they all hold each other up. He's like, no. For those of you who aren't aware what we're talking about, we'll make sure to plug a link to that in the chat. But yes, so that was Justin, and that's just kind of a very high level thing. It was a really good conversation, so I encourage all of you guys to check it out. And if none of that interests you, we talked a little bit about psychoactive drugs and how those could possibly be used in the mental health space. And Justin's someone we're probably going to have on in the future because there's a lot of various areas we could dive into further. And we talked a little bit about therapy as well. And you had a bit of an emergency you had to step aside, and so we didn't get to hear what you were thinking. So we're going to have to bring him back at some point.
I talk enough.
We've got
70-something episodes of me talking.
Yes. So in case you missed that, go watch all 70-something and hear him talk a lot more. But that was our recap. And then for our challenge, which I didn't have pulled up right in front of me, unfortunately, but it was around, one second, stalling. Yes.
I should probably be picking up the slack here, but
yeah,
I'm just staring.
I like it. So it was, he talked about this concept of body scanning. Have you ever heard that term before?
You just checking your bodily awareness?
It's kind of like a form of meditation. And it's like, okay, like you start and you kind of scan your body, like, oh, okay, I feel my fingers, I feel my arms, like you kind of you go across your body. And I'm going to share a link here in a second when we roll the intro about one video that Danielle and I followed actually after the show, because we're like, that sounds like a cool thing. And it was basically an easy way to do a meditation is just like sit there and just follow the instructions, and it's like, hey, okay, feel this, focus that, notice what it feels like. And it was just a really easy way to start meditating, I feel like, especially for people who haven't tried it before. And also, as Justin was talking about, he realized, like, as you start to do that more, you can start to associate things, be like, hey, I recognize, like, there's a lot of tightness in my chest. Like, I think that's kind of tied to some anxiety or some stress that I'm feeling. And so he mentioned that as one of the tools that worked well for him. So with that being said, we have a guest today, so we don't want to keep them waiting much longer. So let's go ahead and jump over to our intro. Helpful for life. Welcome to What the Hell is Water? This is episode 80. Today is January 27th, 2022. It's got to be every now and then, right?
Yeah, no, at least once an episode.
Yeah.
Instead of once a week, I think we've been slacking.
Yeah, we really need to step that one up. But yeah, so I'm writer Richard.
And I'm Reed Garcia.
Hello, I'm Reed Garcia.
Throw some titles up there that we know who we are. It's easy to lose yourself. Hey, this is Ryder.
And this is Reed. I'm the founder of Helpful for Life, and this is Ryder, and that's right. And so today we have a lovely guest with us, and she's hitting in the wings right now. Her name is Caylena Cahill, and her and I met actually at a conference, which for those who either are really old or really young or just anyone and don't know what it's like, a conference is where people, humans, get together in person in large numbers, and they hang out together.
I thought that was a Renaissance fair.
That sounds fun too.
You should probably do that next time.
Yeah, I do think so.
Like, was this actually a Renaissance fair under the guise of being a conference?
Well, one could argue that it was a renaissance of ideas because the conference was a conference called Forbes 30 Under 30 Summit. And have you ever heard of the 30 Under 30 lists?
I mean, I've had friends who have won awards for being top something, whatever, in the 30 under 30 category.
Cool. So just so we're clear, whoever a writer's friends are, hire a writer for marketing, top something in the whatever.
Something. And I'm sure it's important and your mom is proud of you.
Yes. Writer's mom, we hope you're really proud of him right now.
As I denigrate awards.
Yes, exactly. So Forbes is a business magazine, and every year they have some lists that they release called 30 Under 30. And the idea is they take 30 people under the age of 30, and they do it in a bunch of various categories. And they say, hey, these are like 30 people you should watch. They're 30 aspiring people who are making waves, doing all this kind of stuff. Fortunately for you, you're not under 30, so you don't have to worry about this.
Thank goodness, one of the other benefits of old age.
Yes.
One less thing to worry about.
But whoever makes it on that list gets a free invite to this conference, the 30 Under 30 Summit. And then basically they opened it up and said, hey, anyone else who wants to come, like you can come pay to this conference. It's supposed to be a place where a bunch of people are getting together. Like you're trying to make waves, trying to do some stuff. And so me and Caylena were both trying to make waves, both trying to do some stuff back in, I want to say it was 2017. Something like that. It was in Boston. And on my personal website, reedpgarcia.com, there's a picture of me on Fenway Park. In Fenway Park, because one of the social things was we went there after dark, and I was like, this is kind of cool. And then like just standing on the field and stuff. And then I like made a picture on my personal website, and it's like, this is Fenway Park. And I'm like, I just did that for people who don't recognize it. But I'm like, this makes it sound like, this is Fenway Park, man.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because if you don't announce where you are, like, you could have photoshopped yourself in.
Yeah.
And maybe you did anyway. And maybe this whole thing
there's
is just
only
a big
one
story
person
right now
who can tell us if that's true or not.
Yeah,
so let's go ahead and jump
on.
over to her. Because this intro got really long, really fast, which you're familiar with things like that, right, Ryder?
Things getting long.
Hello,
fast.
good morning, Caylena. Hey.
Hello, that wasn't awkward at all.
He gets that a lot. Don't worry. Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. I am all right. I am okay.
There you go.
So for you, how would you capitalize or spell out that okay?
Somewhere between the capital OK and the superscript OK.
Okay, I like that. I mean, okay, I like that.
Yeah. I kind of like it with a question mark at the end, too.
Okay. I'm okay?
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So just so you're aware, the title that I gave us for today was an aspiring creative entrepreneur. How does that sound for you? Sure, I like it.
Why not? Yeah.
Right.
How about aspiring digital nomad?
Digital nomad. I like that one too.
That's good.
So for those who've never heard that term before, what does digital nomad mean?
I don't really know yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure that out. But
that's a good answer too, though.
But yeah, aspiring digital nomad, someone that travels around the world and somehow makes money in the process.
Yeah, the ability to work from wherever, which more and more people have obviously become aware of now that COVID became a thing and everybody was learning how to work remotely. So a digital nomad, work from wherever, travel, go to the places you want to go. So what makes you want to do that?
Well, probably I've just always wanted to travel, and I traveled a while ago and then came back because of visa issues, and then life took a weird turn and things happened, and I didn't get to travel for a while, mostly financially, but also in a relationship with someone that didn't want to travel. And then the pandemic happened, and so that kind of put a damper on things. And in the last year I started to travel again, and I really felt like I was coming alive.
Yeah? What do you think about travel that makes you feel alive?
That's a good question.
Well, let me do this then, actually, since I know a little bit of your history. Why don't we talk about one of your first larger trips, right? You went to France for a while. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Which time?
The first time. Let's start with the first one.
So the first time I went to France was in high school. I went on a school trip with some teachers and some other students from my high school. And we did like a whirlwind 12-day tour with EF Tours. And we landed in Dublin and stayed there a few days. And fun fact, I was under 18. And when we went to the Guinness factory, I couldn't even try any. So that's sad, but I'm not a big beer fan anyway, so oh well. And then we went to Wales and we visited the town with the longest name that I can't pronounce and couldn't even tell you what it is. And it means something about a whirlpool. And then we went to some castles and to London and all of that. And then we took the Channel to Paris. And that was the first time that I fell in love with Paris. And then we went to Normandy and saw the beaches, and then we went home, and I knew I needed to go back.
Yeah.
And
I heard castles. I heard Normandy. I heard beaches. I mean, that sounds pretty miserable.
Yeah, horrible trip. Sorry.
I don't get why you were appealed to it at all.
I hope I didn't sound too Eeyore like.
You're in good company. Why do I think you put Rue and Ryder together?
You can't. In contrast with me, everyone sounds much better. So you're doing great. No, yeah, like I think that I did an early European trip too, and when I was in college or something, and just came back thinking like my whole life was changed, and was immediately like, yeah, I got to go back, got to figure this out. Did that sort of hook you on it, or have you done a lot of traveling before that?
No, that hooked me on it. Before that, I'd only really been around the Northeast, and then like to Disney World and once to California. So
that's a pretty good hook, I would say.
Yeah.
So you went to France. So one other thing that I know about you is, I don't know if it was before that trip or during that trip, but you like to speak French. Tell us a little bit about how that got started.
Well, it's pretty banal, actually. In 7th grade, we had to choose what language we were going to take in school, and my sister had taken Spanish, and the only other option was French, and so I took French.
And you wanted to be different, basically. Huh? I like it. Hey, that would be an interesting chain to follow. Like, everyone just saying, hey, here's the things I did just because I wanted to be different than like a sibling or a friend or someone, and just see how much people's lives change because of that.
Right. The paths you take, and it's like you didn't want to have a secret language with your sister. You were like, nope, I'll have my own secret language.
Yeah. So 2 things on what you guys just said was, I'm actually a part of a bilingual Toastmasters club right now. I don't know if you know what Toastmasters is.
Why don't you tell our audience what it is real quick?
Well, so basically it's like an international group with chapters all over to practice public speaking. And there's like a curriculum, and you get together with a group of people and you do speeches, both prepared and off the cuff. And the one that I'm in is bilingual with Spanish and English. So I've got involved in this during the pandemic, and I'm trying to get better at speaking Spanish. But my first speech, which they call like an icebreaker speech, is just supposed to be something like about you and or like why you're in the club or something like that. And so my speech, I gave it in Spanish, and it was kind of about that story, which I just talked about, which was about choosing French. And then kind of I led into like, well, it was about being different from my sister, but then kind of how that kind of led to me ending up being trilingual, and how that was surprising.
Wait,
well,
so what's
because I took
French.
Uno, deux, tres.
Yes, 3.
It doesn't sound as good when you don't end on trois. Let's be real.
No. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Well, so anyway, it was kind of interesting when I was writing that speech to reflect on how different our lives are.
Yeah. Well, I know that talking about languages is something that's very important to you, and it's up to you whether or not we want to go down this route or not. But do you want to talk about some of the people maybe you've met from speaking Spanish?
From speaking Spanish?
Yeah, like on using some apps online and things like that.
No, not really.
All right, cool. We'll just leave that one there. Hey, that's why. That's the beauty of it. We're just seeing which doors we're gonna open. Well, let's just take a complete
No, that one's a little
fresh. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and
No, but
jump.
you know what I can say about that?
Okay.
I will say something actually.
Go for it.
So during the pandemic, I wanted to practice Spanish, but I live alone and there was nowhere to go meet people. So I downloaded an app to practice with native speakers, and I made 2 friends. And I didn't really expect anything to come of it, like long term. I just thought, oh, this will be a fun thing to do for like a couple days, and I don't know, I'll chat with people online and practice Spanish, and then I'll get bored and do something else. But I actually like made 2 friends that I'm in communication with, and I've ended up meeting in person. But like they don't live in the U.S. They actually both live in Bogota, Colombia.
Okay.
And so one of my 2 trips during the pandemic was to visit them in Bogota, Colombia.
That's pretty cool.
So it kind of, it was just so like random and how things kind of come together and one thing leads to another. So I ended up going to Bogota in July, and it was my first time in Latin America. And it was a crazy experience. So.
Yeah. So the first thing I gotta make sure to ask for all of our viewers at home is, you went to Colombia? How are you still alive?
I know. Right?
Well, you know, everyone was very worried that I was going to be kidnapped at the airport and sold into the sex trade. And also that I would be forced to smuggle some cocaine home or that I'd be mugged. Um, when in reality, no, my friend came to pick me up at the airport and we took a taxi and went back to my friend's place. And then basically I had personal tour guides.
That's awesome. Well, I want to make sure to say, because I don't know if we've talked about it on the show before, that's the thing about traveling to a lot of these other countries. You remember that the news is by definition something that's different. And so
Also movies.
Yeah, and movies and TV shows. And remember, like, hey, why do I think this thing about this entire country? Why am I writing off this entire country? Remember that you're hearing all of the things that make headlines because they're different. And you don't hear about the 99.999% of people who go to these places and are perfectly fine and have a great time. Unless you happen to follow them on Instagram and you get to be jealous of how they get to go to these cool places like Cartagena, where it's this really vibrant town where it's on the beach and all the walls are different colors of the buildings, and you get to eat all this amazing different food. You get to try all this different coffee. You get to do all of these things.
And you get to swim in the Caribbean.
Yeah, the real reason to travel comes out.
Yes. Well, so travel is one part of the thing that you like to do, right? So you mentioned you want to be a digital nomad and an aspiring digital nomad. But another thing that I know you like to do is, like I said, you're an aspiring creative. And on the wall behind you, it looks like you've got a couple of pieces of art or something. What is that back there?
Ooh.
Wow, you got a really good cameraman behind the camera there. Well done.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah, there's iMac, man.
So tell us what those are.
So that was a project that I did. It's photography. That food photography is one of the things that I've promoted over this last decade or so. And I did this project to explore colors and shape and form within interesting fruits and vegetables.
That's pretty cool.
So you can look at it again.
Oh yeah, let me give you a full screen for that one. Yeah, so what is the where can people see more of that if they want to see a little bit more of that art? Because honestly, that's one of my favorite exhibits that you did, the color and the food. What was it called again?
Just the color project. Very original.
The color project. And they can find that on your website, right?
Yeah, it's just on my website, Caylena.com.
Caylena.com, and we'll drop a link in the chat for that as well. So let's talk about the origin of how you started to get into photography in this creative space. Like, what made you get started?
Oh, when I was like 7, I played around with disposable cameras. Do you remember those things?
Yeah.
There are these little boxes that have what they call film, and you can buy them in the store and take pictures, and then you send it away, and then pictures come back like weeks later on little pieces of paper.
Wait, there's so many things in that sentence now. I'm like, I feel like you have to explain. Okay, paper is this.
And then you throw out the little box that had the film in it because it was disposable. And
You're
you
telling
can't
me we
reuse
did
it.
that to the environment all the time?
Oh my goodness.
What horrible
And-
people.
And you couldn't control anything on the settings. You just took it as it were. And so I used to take pictures. I had this Barbie doll that was like the gymnastics Barbie, and she had like movable and bendable limbs.
Nice.
And so I set her up in these like funny gymnastics positions and would take pictures. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I was pretty terrible at taking pictures with disposable cameras, and so like they weren't good at all. But anyway, I started that, and then for Christmas, my parents gave me a 35 millimeter point and shoot camera. So basically, that means that I didn't have to throw out my camera anymore, but I could get film rolls and take pictures, and I still couldn't really control the settings, but I could zoom. And so then I'd take pictures of friends, family, the Christmas tree, anything and everything. Um, and like Girl Scout camping trips and everything. And so, one thing leads to another, like it does in life. And I find myself in high school taking black and white photography, and the darkroom was just like this other magical world. Uh, People that take pictures now don't understand that photography is actually magic, aka it's chemistry and physics, aka magic. And so, if you've ever been in a dark room, basically this orange glow, and you shine light through some film and onto a blank sheet of paper, and then you put this blank sheet of paper into some chemicals, and you can watch as a picture appears.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Ryder, do you have any photography in your history or not so
Yeah,
much?
a little bit. I mean, it's a sort of basic. Went through art school, so took like a beginning photo course, and then whenever I was department chair at one of the colleges, then of course we had a dark room, and we were one of the only campuses that had a dark room left because the chemicals have gotten really expensive and hard to dispose of, and almost everyone's going digital anyway, so you only have a few diehards left who actually want to keep using film. And so it's just one of the kind of an interesting spot to be in now. But yeah, there's a lot of magic that can happen in the film room, and it does turn the sort of oftentimes the light into a physical substrate, and that is magic. Like it's really quite amazing.
Yeah, and I'm going to be a little selfish here and show off something slightly related. Ryder, if you'll hold that up. And
Sure.
Caylena, you're gonna pop off the screen here for a second, but don't be worried about it. So Ryder's holding up here a little silicone wafer. So if any of you guys know about how microchips or things like that are made, that is what they are. They start out as much bigger than that on an industrial scale. But each one of those is a little square that will be cut and then put into a chip. And then from there, you can put that back in here. They'll put a little plastic around it, and it looks kind of like an ant. It's got a little black thing. It's got little leads on the side, and it looks kind of like an ant. The reason I bring that up is because that was actually kind of my first exposure to photography was in college when I was taking the class that showed you how to make these things, because it's really cool. You basically work on the computer, you design what you're wanting to do, and then through a series of essentially darkroom things, you create a mask, and then you say, hey, you start off with this solid thing, and then you do a light to it, and then you put chemicals, and you kind of repeat that to etch off certain layers. And so, anyways, just a little aside. We'll probably talk about that more another day.
Yeah, so have you kept up with darkroom stuff, or have you gone digital?
Oh yeah, no. So in college, I took photography as my major, and it was kind of hybrid at that point. And so I did some film. I mean, I did enough film where I did like large format 4x5 camera stuff and medium format and all of that. But it was hybrid in that like then we would also like scan our film and print digitally for a lot of stuff, and then we would they also had like digital cameras, and so I would use those for different things, like not a lot of my like assignments, but I worked for like the college newspaper and stuff like that, and so that was all digital. And now I'm fully digital. I just don't really have access to a dark room at this point, so um, yeah, so I'm fully digital. But yeah, Oh, what else to say about
No,
that?
no, I appreciate that.
I miss film, but it's not practical.
Yeah, that's it's just one of the things that we bump into a lot with a lot of different aspects of art, and especially being in schools, you have access to resources, and then you get out of school and you're like, I'd love to continue this hobby, but I have to dedicate a whole chunk of my room and all this stuff to it, and then like no apartment building is going to want you to have all those chemicals in there mixing. So yeah, it is kind of an interesting thing, and yeah, with everything going digital, I mean, there's something else about what I remember Apple, or maybe it was like Steve Jobs or something, saying this at one point. He was like, "You don't need to worry about how to take a photograph anymore. We're gonna figure that out for you." Right. So, yeah, how do you feel about that kind of
Great
stuff?
question.
Well, it's it's complicated. So, um, this past year, I made the switch to mirrorless.
Yeah.
So that was like probably besides going digital in the first place, which like for me it was a very natural process. Um, Going digital, it wasn't like all of a sudden I'm digital. It was like this long transition just kind of naturally happened throughout life as like as I went to college, and then college was like hybrid, and then I graduated, and it just like was natural and went with it. Um, but mirrorless was like a huge. It's like basically putting a cell phone in a DSLR, and so you get kind of the best of both worlds. So like you know how on using your phone you don't have to control the exposure that much because you can see it. Well, with the mirrorless you can also just see it, but you have all the controls that you would have on a DSLR, because you can like change the lens, so you can change your own focal lengths, and you can control the aperture and depth of field, and you can control all of that. But when you look through the viewfinder, instead of like with a DSLR, you're seeing the real world with a DSLR when you look through the viewfinder, because you're seeing like a reflection on a mirror, etc. With mirrorless, you're actually seeing a screen, and it's showing you a preview. Well, there's different settings, but you can set it to show you a preview of what your exposure would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's only based on the like ambient, so what's out there in the world. If you're like getting more complex and using flash and stuff like that, it's not going to show you that. Obviously, it can't predict like where you set your flash up and all of that, but um, it probably could someday because all of these flashes are radio powered anyway. So probably there could be some technology in the future where it would like build a digital model of based on the radio transmitter of where your flashes are, and it knows what power setting it's at, so it could probably guess. Honestly, we could get to that point. I could see, I mean, I don't know, I don't read up a lot on
Yeah,
that
well,
sort of stuff, but
one of the,
I could imagine that not being too far off actually.
and one of the things that naturally comes into play with this is, as someone who is a photographer and gets paid to be a photographer, let me know if you've ever heard the phrase like, "Well, why should I pay you all this money when I could take a picture with my iPhone?"
You could, but I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm
Well, I think what's interesting
No,
is
but
what
I mean, like,
with the Sony, you were talking about overwriting things, right? Like,
oh yeah. So I mean, I'm on Canon, but yeah,
or yeah,
it's just
sorry,
the mirrorless technology.
yeah.
So basically, it's so like when you're using your iPhone, you don't have that much control. And like newer ones, they'll have more lenses on them. They have like three cameras or however many, so that you can kind of change whether it's a wide angle or zoomed in or whatever. But ultimately, you're still taking a picture through a tiny little lens, and you can't really control it that much. And you can only have so much resolution from that tiny of a um,
Sensor.
sensor. So there's still a lot of factors. And then, not to mention lighting, dynamic range, and composition, and um, actual depth of field. So, like on a phone, I mean, on the newer ones, it might be different because they have different lenses and stuff. But generally, like I have a Pixel as my phone, and it has a really good camera, and it's great for snapshots. And the algorithm is great because it like automatically does HDR, and it does it like pretty well. And I can fake a little bit of depth of field with So depth of field is like having a blurry background or whether everything's in focus. So you can kind of fake it with portrait mode, but it's not perfect because you can still see kind of the edges and like it's not great, because it just doesn't work as well as like, if you have a lens that's giving you a blurry background because it looks natural. Because it's based on physical space
Yeah.
and like what's actually in focus and what's actually not in focus versus like the whole thing was already in focus and the computer algorithm kind of guesses where it should not be in focus.
Yeah, and a big thing with all these is, as the device gets smarter, as it can do more things for you, it focuses, maybe it eventually does things with the flash, all this type of fancy stuff, right? Is at the end of the day, there's still the human eye that needs to get to the thing. And there's one cool feature that I've seen on some Samsung phones where it says, all right, you're taking these pictures of these people, and then it'll highlight like a green box, and it says, here's where the best photo is or the best shot. And then so it's like encourages you to move your phone, and it uses your accelerometer and stuff like that to recognize that, hey, you're moving. And I think that's so cool. And the aspect that I really like about the technology moving in this direction is that it is encouraging the average person to get involved with photography. Whereas before, it was very much had to be an intentional, effortful thing. And there were a lot of people who did it, right? But they would go get these pictures, they would go take them, and then a lot of times they wouldn't do anything with them because then they got to process them, or maybe they print them out. And I don't think there's many, especially '90s kids like myself, whose parents don't have albums and albums and albums of photos, and it's like once every 10 years I might go and kind of like pin through them, but largely they just sit there, collecting dust. So that's another nice thing about the digital age.
Yeah, and of course they just collect digital dust a lot of times now. So, but
Yeah,
you can
that's what
still
I was.
pull up a photo album, I guess, on a screen or a laptop or something and have it running in the background.
Yeah, that's the thing that I don't know what to do with my digital photos actually. I just went on a trip to Hawaii in December and I took like 6,000 pictures and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with these. They're just here. Everyone's like, "Oh, I want to see them." And I'm like, I'm overwhelmed with all of these
Yeah,
pictures.
and
6,000. Yeah.
yeah, I want
Well,
to.
I
We're
was
gonna
there for
do
3 weeks. So,
that
you
helps. I
know.
mean, I took probably around the same when I went to South America. I took definitely thousands. I know because each time I made a folder for every new thousand. There's a lot of folders. But I think we're probably gonna do a short course on that. So we'll plug that link at some point about how to down select from a larger group of photos. There's actually a really cool video I watched the other day on a guy who's a National Geographic photographer. For those who are unaware, National Geographic's a nature magazine, and they get some really cool photos of animals, fungi, all this cool stuff in really high definition. It's a cool time we live in that you can see all these things in the pristine, like large scale that we can now. And he talks about his process of down selecting from. In his case, he took like I think 100 and something photos of a cat like in an apartment, and he's like, and here's my process, and he goes step by step of okay, well first I'll do this, and that'll help me get rid of it, and it's a really cool video. Gonna end up sharing a whole bunch of videos in chat or the description probably after this because as we're talking here, like I know a really good video that talks about DSLR where it shows how the shutter actually moves out of the way to make room for the camera or the mirror, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a really cool thing. And there's another one I'll show a little later about how by Destin Sandlin of Smarter Every Day, where he talks about the value of going back to print photography, and he's talking about his journey through that over the last few months where he's bought these old cameras, and he's like, actually, like, these are the nice thing about old quote unquote analog stuff is it's a lot cheaper now because people don't want it as much. And he's like, the cameras, like right before we made this switch to full digital, they're actually really good, and they have all this cool mix of like, hey, you have the analog stuff but you still have like the digital smarts, so it's kind of like the best of both worlds. But yeah, don't want to go down too far of a rabbit hole with photography.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say though about the analog versus digital is like I actually really miss the tactile aspect of it. Like I didn't get into photography to sit behind a computer all day long. You know, like
Yeah, that's a really good
it
point.
was a very like physical thing. And so you're in this physical room that's orange and you have like a piece of paper in your hand or you have like a canister with your film that you're literally shaking in order to make the pictures appear on the film. And like, it was a very physical process. And so that I think can also be kind of meditative
Yeah.
and like, um, it's like a different experience, you know, it's very experiential versus like taking a bunch of digital pictures and you can see it immediately and then you go to the computer and you do whatever you're going to do with it. In my case, let it sit there for a while a lot of times, unless it's like client work, it's different. But like my own stuff, it ends up sitting there for a while. But that's like the thing is like anytime I go and I actually print out a digital photo, it's like it reminds me of that. You know,
Yeah.
like having these prints on the wall, it's like it's brings me back, you know? And so even when like a print, if you have a printer and you come and you see it, watch it coming out of the printer, like that's not the same as seeing an image appear from chemicals, but it's like similar because it's bringing the thing to life that was like just on a screen and you can hold it in your hand. So anyway, for whatever that's worth.
No, that's cool. And I mean, speaking of both holding things in hands and physical, Ryder here messes with wood all the time. And he really is into DIY and he really likes the physical aspect of that, right?
Yeah, like I don't. I mean, I've I've got a master's degree in painting, right? So I've got a minor in sculpture, and I tend to read philosophy books, right? So there's something about mixing up the head and the hand, and realizing that yes, the real world is here. We have bodies, and that we actually learn a lot through our bodies in the world. And this kind of idea of digitizing everything it's a trend, right? And everything is moving that direction. But do you feel the same levels of satisfaction? Why is it there's always this return to the physical? And what's that about, right? Like, why do we crave these things so much? Like, what there's something about tactility and haptics and stuff like that that, getting that feedback from the real world or being able to reference something in the real world has a different kind of impact on us. And so it's just something that's part of human nature, and I'm watching a return to it in a lot of ways. Usually, hopefully everything syncs together, right? That the digital enriches the real. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, especially as, things like AR and VR start to become more realities that we see, if not in everyday life, but more often. That's something to be keeping in mind. And it very much gets to design. We had the episode where we talked about design in video games and also in VR and how you like encourage people to do certain things based off of how you design the environment, whether that's a physical environment or a digital environment. So I think it's an interesting time to be here, right, and to be living. And you mentioned haptics too, but one of the things, hashtag nerd over here is whenever you may not notice it, but especially if you have an iPhone, because that's what I'm most familiar with because I've had it the longest. But as you do certain things, your phone actually vibrates, and that's what's called haptic feedback. And it says, "Oh, hey, without you having to think about it or pay attention to it, you're recognizing, it's acknowledging that you did something, which is something that was not as good at the beginning. It's gotten a lot better now, and you can actually basically there's a little motor inside of your phone, and it does different things, different patterns, different speeds to let you know different things. And one thing you can do, this isn't really haptic feedback, but in case you didn't know, pro tip for you on your iPhone, you can set custom vibrations for different people when they're calling you. So you're like, this is my friend in Colombia. Maybe I'll use one vibration feedback this week, and then the next week I might change it based on how I'm feeling towards that person. I don't know.
Yeah. And then your phone tells you how you're feeling by those vibrations. You're like, apparently my phone is telling me I'm angry right now because it's giving me the angry vibration.
Yeah, the angry vibration.
You know what? I've seen actually, there's like different apps. So like, how there's like Fitbit and stuff like that to track like your exercise and whatever. There's been different technology development in the area around mood and everything like that and tracking your mood. And so that's probably not actually too science fiction-y what you're saying.
No,
Yeah.
it's coming along. One of the fun things about there was a guy named Willem Flusser who has this kind of theory that we are actually, as humans, we serve technology. It doesn't serve us, right? So for instance, when you think about the success of the camera, going from this big clunky box, it was originally camera obscuras and then clunky boxes on tripods, it would take hours, and now we're carrying something in our pocket that we pull out and see the world through instantly. Like when you think about the evolutionary meme and the power of the camera to control humans to make it constantly better, then if you kind of reverse that relationship and think of the camera as being the intelligent thing that's controlling us, like he has these kind of ideas about that, and it's kind of a fun way to think about it, is how much this technology is actually manipulating us and we're
Fun?
just serving it. Well, maybe it's
How about
creepy, but
terrifying?
well, you could give it as much power
Porque
as
no
you
los
want.
dos,
Some
right?
people find horror movies fun, you know.
No, that's really interesting though, and I want to make sure to mention that, you know, for those who have any interest in the history of the evolution of the technology aspect of photography, there's a great playlist by a channel called Technology Connections, which we'll put in the chat, and it talks about from the beginning, like, hey, we started out with these lithographs. And it talks about the process as it goes and as it develops, and it appreciate. There's also puns in it as well, so naturally, I appreciate it. So you guys should check that out if you're interested. But I want us to move on because we could talk about photography all day, and certainly maybe we will another day. But a couple other things I wanted to talk about, and one of them was an illustration project you did. So you did something that's called a 365 project. Tell us what that is. This idea of a 365 project in general, and then tell us why you did it, and then tell us a little bit about the one that you chose.
Sure. So everybody's heard of like a 30-day challenge, like where you do something every day for 30 days. And in theory, that's supposed to help you build a habit or something like that, make a change, or just because you feel like it's cool or it's a trend, whatever. So anyway, it kind of stems from that idea. So 365 is about doing something every day for a year. And of course, that's a much more substantial commitment than 30 days. But apparently, go big or go home. So I guess. So, you know, um, I'm an overachiever. So that's it. I did
So
a
365
365
days, you did something every day for an entire year. And I know from you
Yes.
telling me you started on your birthday and you ended on your birthday. So I think that's a fun little birthday present to yourself. And, you know, we talk about Rome research here all the time, and we were just talking about photography. One of the things we didn't mention, I know I said we weren't going to talk about it anymore, lies, is how, you know, fundamentally it affects how we view the past. And that's something that ever since this has become digital, our idea and view and lens on history is different forever. And when you combine that idea of photography with the idea of social media, with the idea of everyone has this in their pocket, like history is never going to be the same again, because that's the thing is like we know what we do about history largely from people's stories and people's records. And oh, by the way, that's the thing about journalism, especially when it was all, you know, companies doing it, was they have their spin, they have their angle, they have their reasoning. Whereas now, since everything has been much more democratized, it's completely changed the way history has developed and will be remembered. So quick aside that we won't dive into because tangent, but yeah, so back to your 365 project, your illustration. So what was it that, tell us exactly what the thing was you did every day.
Okay, so you also asked why I did it. So you asked what it was that I did. So you might assume, except for the fact that you said illustration, that a 365 for me would be a photo project. And initially, a couple of years ago, I tried that. I tried to do that to just increase my creativity with photography and everything. But being that I'm a professional photographer, and at that point, I was like more of a budding professional photographer. Um, I ended up quitting after like 90 to 100 days because it was too much to try to figure out what counted, like what counts towards the project. Does like a snapshot on my phone count as a photo for that day or what? Because I had this whole idea about reputation and like it has to be good. It has to be something I can share because it was part of like being on social media and like showing your work and all of this, and it became too much pressure. And so I quit after 90 to 100 days, which I mean, 90 to 100 days is still kind of a lot, but um, anyway, so I quit. But then during the pandemic, I wanted to develop, as part of my like desire to go digital nomading, and as everything going remote with the pandemic and everything, I wanted to increase my design and illustration skills. Um, and so I decided, I tried a few different things to kind of build a habit of doing a daily illustration to build those skills, because I know that part of learning a new skill is like forcing yourself to suck for a while and just being okay with it.
Right. That
And,
sounds familiar, huh?
Yeah,
um,
forcing yourself to suck.
Yeah.
Can we quote you on this?
sorry, no. Anyway,
You heard it here
you
first,
know,
ladies and gentlemen.
forcing yourself to be okay with being terrible at a new skill. That's the reason why a lot of people take classes, because it gives them the structure and forces them to practice. And so I realized that, and I was like, well, I should just do it, because that's how you learn things, if you just do it. I mean, of course, taking classes also like teaches you new aspects of the skill, and you get like osmosis from the teacher and all of that, right? Like there's other reasons to take classes for things. I'm not saying that you don't have to do that, but anyway, so I tried a few different things to try to do like a daily drawing, and it never really stuck. And then in like November-ish, I came up with the idea of doing a 365, because I felt like that would give me the structure and accountability to actually do the reps, as they say, to build the skills. And then it would also give me things to transition and use as a portfolio material. And so I decided I would start on my birthday, because that made sense, because my birthday's in November and it was easy to then remember when I'm done and all of that. And so I didn't have like a real plan for what it was going to be. But I went to Michael's and I bought some materials, some like a journal sketchbook and some other sketchbooks. And it was very like low budget. I didn't buy a lot of like art supplies or anything. I mostly used what I had, which at the beginning was like pencils, because in high school I did some drawing, and mostly pencils, and I had like an old set of markers that was like partially drying out. And so that's what I started with, those and the sketchbooks. And it ended up being that I used the journal format of the sketchbook. And originally I thought it would be a mix, like digital and analog. It would just be whatever I felt like that day, because partly I wanted to get better at Illustrator and like vector drawing and stuff. And that ended up not really being part of the project. It ended up being much more of like a analog art project. And so I have 4 of these journals now that have every day dated and numbered with some kind of illustration or painting or drawing or scribble or something.
I think
So
that's
basically,
really cool, by the way.
it could be, it did, like, it became like about the practice of doing it. So I also have a yoga practice, which before I did this drawing thing, I did like yoga every day, twice a day for a year. And
Wow.
that wasn't just like, I'm going to do that. It was like about building a discipline. And that doesn't mean I did yoga for a half an hour. It could mean I like laid on the floor and did shavasana for 2 minutes. Or
What's
like
that word
I
mean?
did
I don't know the yoga terms.
so like when you do like a yoga practice, you do your poses, and then at the end they have what they call shavasana. Basically, you're just lying on the floor in silence.
Nice. If you can't do yoga, start with
Yeah.
Shavasana.
I do that every night.
Yeah. Yeah, your wife told
Right.
us.
I just didn't know. I
So-
called it sleeping. It's
Yeah,
almost
well,
the same thing.
So yeah, so shavasana. So it's kind of like the body scan thing that you were talking about at the beginning before I was live and in public. So the it's basically the meditation at the end of the session. But you know, when you go to yoga classes, some of the teachers, they say, listen to your body. Everything I'm saying is just a suggestion or an offering, and you don't have to do any of it. If all you want to do is just be in shavasana the whole time, like that's what your body needs, just go for it. So anyway, my yoga practice was like just about doing it. It wasn't like, it didn't have to be anything. It was like, if all I want to do is one downward dog pose, like, you know, the pose where like you're on your hands and your feet
Yeah.
and your butts in the air, like a triangle. Like if I do one of those and then I just lay in shavasana, like I did it for the day.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I
that's
like
it.
that a lot.
And so
I-
the drawing project was kind of like that, in that like it didn't have to be a complete illustration. It could be like whatever. Like I could just grab like 2 colored markers and scribble if I want,
Right.
if that's what I'm feeling. Or I could do like a whole painting. And so there was both.
Well, that's the thing that we talk about a lot here on the show, right? Is the power of one, just getting started, and two, like starting small and aiming small, because you're much more likely to say, for example, if you had 365 days, I'm gonna do a finished illustration that's already colorized and it's in this in Illustrator and it's done all these things, then the most likely thing is you probably wouldn't have done that. You probably would have ended, maybe not on
Just
day
like
90.
with the photography one.
Yeah, exactly. Just like you do with photography one. So there's a whole conversation in that I think we're gonna have Danielle come on, and whether that's on a What the Hell is Water show or on a separate stream, we're gonna have that conversation in the future about the process of trying to decide what is quote unquote good enough, and how do you make something that you keep doing, but in a way that it lets you do it sustainably and do it for a while and actually get the thing done, because that's something Danielle's done a lot with her writing as well. As what is the correct way to do a thing? Do I do it for a certain amount of hours? Do I do it for a certain amount of words? Does it all need to be towards one project? And there's a whole conversation we can dive into that. But Ryder, any thoughts? I mean, on this illustration project 365, there's a lot of different angles we could take on it.
Yeah, I've done these kind of things as well, and used to just have a drawing sketching practice that carried on for, I don't know, like 10 years, where I would just fill up pages, and would give myself page counts, just make sure you're drawing 5 pages a day, and you just go through and you do it, and it takes time. And sometimes there's something about finding your voice, and I think there's an artist named Borofsky that was just really famous for his journaling, and he actually has some pieces that are like massive sculptures that are in like the Natural Sculpture Center here in Dallas. But one of the things about it is there's a way of developing your own voice by the repetitions. So the repetitions over time create difference. And that's kind of an interesting idea when you're talking about putting in the reps, is by simply doing it, you find your own voice. And it's weird. It's like you cut out the extraneous things because you're so focused on doing it. Like, I find that there's certain tendencies I have. There's certain things I'm drawn to, which I didn't know I was drawn to. Maybe I was making backgrounds that were really cool in the past to impress other people, but really all I care about is drawing the figure, right? And through this practice, you whittle away everything that doesn't matter to you, and you can come up with this sort of core of these kind of vital ideas in your own voice. And so I'm really interested in how those practices work with journaling, with drawing, with your own art practice, whatever it is. But yeah, some of it's getting started. Some of it's just setting the routine. I used to wake up at 5 a.m. so that I had time to do these things before I had to go to work. So there's weird things like that. The discipline starts to show up, but also you get addicted to it. Like, I got addicted to the drawing. I loved it. It was like one of the best times of my day.
Yeah. Well, Caylena, so as you did this thing, right? So every day you had some that were great, some that were not so great. Well, first now I got to ask, do you happen to have the journal with you?
Well, they're over there on the other side of the room.
Okay. Well, look, you can go walk over there and grab it, because I want you to grab it for me.
Okay.
So Ryder, as she's grabbing that, so when you were doing these 365 projects, or maybe you didn't call them that, maybe it was just something slightly different. Did you have some angle or slant on it, or was it just like whatever, or what? Did you have some kind of constraint?
No, I tried not to constrain myself, and that was interesting, because you find that even given complete freedom, you have a tendency, and that will show up on its own. And even when you try to break from your own tendencies, you find you keep coming back to them, which is a really fascinating idea of people. I do think that a lot of freedom is actually found through constraint, and a lot of creativity is found through constraint. But just sitting down with a journal and working on it, like, the journal constrains you itself. Your time constrains you itself. Like, you don't even really need to approach it in too many other ways. But if you're having trouble getting started, there's always prompts.
Yeah, and I was just asking Ryder if he had constraints when he was doing his kind of repetitive practice, or was he just saying, "Oh, whatever"? And he said he leaned towards the whatever. And another conversation we'll have another day is just on the concept of, does it matter about having a curated feed? I was just talking with a friend yesterday, and I was like, "Hey, I've got this idea. We could do all these TikTok things." He's like, "Well, I don't know if I want those on my channel. Like, I'm trying to go for this certain thing." And I'm like, "Okay, well, then how much is the medium then controlling the artist? If it's like, why are you not doing that?" And like, well, then maybe make another channel or whatever, if that's what you're trying to do. And so a whole discussion in that I'm putting a pen in for now.
I struggle with that massively, because the conventional wisdom about like social media and about marketing is like having one thing that's your shtick. Like
Yeah.
you have a niche
Niche
and
down.
like
Yeah.
that's it. That's the conventional wisdom. And like I hate that. Like that's just
Yeah,
not me.
I've always wanted. I mean, you should be your own niche, right? Like
Like
you are
I
what you
have
are, and you
so
make what you
many different
make.
interests, but like it makes it hard to it just makes it hard, you know, because like some people they're like, "Oh, I'm this kind of photographer." But I hate being boxed in. Like that's why I'm my own boss and I'm a freelancer and, you know, creative entrepreneur and whatever other titles you want because like I just like variety.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it makes it really hard to market myself
yes, it
because
does. You're talking to a guy who's launching a company that is targeting all of life and pretty much all ages. So that is a topic in and of itself. We could have one, if not multiple, episodes on. So let's scope it for
yeah.
now. But yeah, so why don't you hold up your journal for us real quick? All right. Oh, so I said
Ooh,
journal singular, but you've
nice.
got four
I
things
did
there.
say that I have 4. It was 365 days. So
I mean, that makes sense. So, real quick, why don't you just scroll to a page and hold up what one of them might look like so people can see. And for those who haven't seen it yet, in our chat, we've posted a link to Kaylena's website, caylna.com. And we have specific links in there as well for the 365 projects. You guys can go and
so
see what this looks like.
I technically started the day before my birthday, but I didn't actually count it. I didn't like put the number day 1 or whatever. But anyway, so this was my first one ever. Um, Basically, I was waving goodbye to the age of 31. And then, you know, it progressed. And you were talking about like where do you get the ideas from? Like it just like is anywhere. So I was reading a book about boundaries, and so I just visualized like what I was learning about and
Yeah.
made a concept of it. Um, that was with my markers that were drying out. And sometimes it was like you know, just like a weird pattern. And then so like the first book is a lot of just like pencil drawings. This one was like I found a picture on a photo on Instagram and I drew it. Okay, I'm lost with the camera.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that was a cool idea I saw because I've gone through a lot of yours and
so that's actually the other page. I was just practicing drawing the hand because hands are really freaking hard to draw.
so
And
as
so
you were doing this
then
real quick, Kaylina, you know, one of the ways you found inspiration, you were like some days you had it and some days you just didn't. But one of the ways you found it was to look at things other people did and then just try and draw or create your own spin on it, right?
yeah, so like this is a good example of that. I was starting to experiment with more color and I got these watercolor markers. And this was actually based on a black and white image on Instagram where all of my color in the original is just white. And there was just like a guy on a bicycle and like his reflection underneath him on a line. And that was like the whole picture that I saw on Instagram. And I just added color.
Well, that's cool. Hey,
Um,
read off that username so we can tag them in this.
at JOSBERENDSEN.
Yeah, so Danielle will add that in a post for us. Well,
Okay,
we're
so
coming
that's
up
the
on the end of
first
our time,
one.
just so you're aware,
Okay.
Kaylina.
All right. And then let me just like show you where a little bit where it wound up at the end.
Please.
Um so I started to experiment more with how to use the markers. And that was just based on an experience I had with my friend. We went and got ice cream. And then I got some watercolors. Oh wait, I like this one and it just randomly went on this page. Anyway, so then I got watercolors, like actual paint, and started to experiment with how that works. And like also a lot of them, I like to write, and also this was like about a meditation of. It says observe your senses, notice your surroundings, see, hear, smell, feel, taste, feel the peace with this moment. These are flowers that were in my garden. And
Cool.
Also sparkles because
Also sparkles because why not, right? Well, that
because
was one
it's
of the
fun.
things. That was one of the things I really liked as I started to look through your through all this was it was a cool
So
thing
it
because
kind of went through there.
it was uniquely you, right? And it is a lot of things that were going on in your life, a lot of things that you were thinking about as you were trying to build this business, as you're trying to develop this skill. The thing is like you now have 365 illustrations that are uniquely you, and oh, by the way, they're now anchored in time to each one of those days. And I don't know how it works for you, but for me, anytime I see a picture that's around a day, like oftentimes it starts to bring back a bunch of memories of other things that were going on during that day. As you've looked back, have you noticed that through some of your illustrations?
I mean, I was only half listening to that question, to be honest with you, but yes, it definitely was like there was a lot of them that are definitely about what I was dealing with, like this one
Yeah.
that I just showed. It's
I
hard.
was
It's
just
hard to.
mentioning how
It's
it
this
takes you
camera is
back to like
backwards, so
it
it's like
takes you back
hard.
to the day, right? And you're like
Yeah.
thinking about some of the other things, not just the art itself, but other things that went on your day. And it's kind of in a way like a a snapshot or a what's that thing called where you bury stuff in the ground?
Oh, time
Time
capsule.
Time
capsule.
capsule.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it definitely is.
I was
nice.
thinking funeral.
Funeral. Oh, great.
That
great.
thing where you bury things in the ground.
The thing where you bury that too. That
Yeah,
too.
well, so this one is called Love Slipping Away Through My Fingertips. So if that's not a time capsule, you know.
And that ties in well with the funeral, a little bit of death and love, right? Well, hey, we're wrapping up on time here, but
Yeah.
Ryder, any last questions for Caylena today? Obviously, there's a lot we could dive into in other conversations, but for today, any last questions?
No real questions. Love the drawings, though. Love what you're
Thanks.
doing there and seeing the experimentation with the materials as well. Very cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, hey, Caylena, thank you so much for coming on today. And as we've discussed, we've spawned so many other things, so many other areas we could go. So we'd love to have you on the show sometime in the future. For those people who want to learn a little bit more about you, for people who want to maybe help you out a little bit, what would you say they should do?
Well, if you want to know more, you can go to my website, kaylena.com, or you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is just @Caylena. And if you have any tips on how to manage being eclectic and still managing to have a curated feed and all of that, or you know how to digital nomad, sure, you can reach out to me. You can like message me on Instagram or through my website or something like that.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. And you know what? I look forward to seeing what you'll do next. I think this is such a cool process. And I know as a friend, as I've watched the things you've been learning and doing and going through over the last few years, I know the next handful of things you're going to do are going to be pretty powerful, both for yourself and I also think for some other people as well. So I really look forward to it.
Thank you, Reed and Ryder. And maybe I'll see you someday live and in person at a conference.
Yeah, one of those conference things.
Yeah.
40
I'm
under
gonna be,
40.
I'll be the
I'm
guy
no-
carrying
I'm
an
no
axe.
I'm no longer under 30.
Yeah,
so,
50 under 50.
I can't be under 30 anymore.
I'm still just going to go to Renaissance fairs. I'm not doing the
I like it.
conferences.
Well, maybe someday I'll see you at a Renaissance fair. I'll have some fairy wings and some fun makeup. And...
There we go.
That doesn't
Yeah.
sound on brand for you, Caylena.
I'll be the guy eating a huge turkey
What are you
leg.
talking about?
You need to stick to
What
your
are you
curated
talking
feed.
about? In high school, my favorite Halloween costume was when I was a goth fairy. All right.
A goth fairy. That
Oh,
sounds like a
man.
story.
Yeah.
That sounds like a story. Well, Caylena, thank you so much for coming on. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for
You
sharing some
too.
of yourself and some of your art with us.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me. See you soon.
All right. Well,
Cool. It's
we're-
always fun seeing people who are being creative and tackling, I don't know, interesting stuff, like involving themselves in art and challenging themselves and making drawings and photography. And like, it's like, yeah, like there's a lot of emotion that goes into it, a lot of heart. And then this idea of like, okay, well, I'm doing this now. How do I move through the world? How do I make a living off of it?
yeah, and that's been one of my favorite things as I've shifted my career from being an electrical engineer at a big company to being something that's more of a creative and more of there's this term creator, which has a lot of things associated with it now, and it's been really cool. It's one of my favorite things is seeing not only like from myself, like some of the things that I've done and being able to look back and see like, hey, these are the things I've done. I can now see them separate from myself, which I could do a little bit with work, but is also a little more abstract because it's like, oh, I worked on the satellite, and now it goes however many thousands of feet up into space, and then it's like it's out of sight, out of mind. But that's one of the cool things about something like this is you can have those essentially journals on your coffee table, whatever, and you go grab them and you be like, oh, I was telling this story about this thing. Here's what was going on that day, and here's some of the art that I made. I just think that's such a cool concept, and the beauty of it too is that it doesn't take much to get started. You heard it from her. Like, she just went and got a couple of these little, is there a fancy name for those sketchpad book things?
No, I mean, and there's all sorts of different brands. Moleskine is a good one, but there's all sorts of them, and you can, look for paper quality, because if you're going to be putting watercolor and markers on there, you're going to get bleed through or break up of the paper if it's not a good paper. That's the only real recommendation, and even at that point, you're out an entire $20 that can last you for 6 months while you draw on it.
Yeah, and so you may not know the exact one off the top of your head, but for people who have no idea, what were some things they should search?
Yeah, I mean, I would look for roughly like 100-pound paper quality. See what you can find in there. The watercolor paper is, of course, a lot thicker, so you'll get a lot fewer pages and it'll be more expensive. But those are things to kind of look for. If you're going to just be using pens and pencils, you can use anything. I used to travel around with Moleskine was the brand I used to use. Is it
spelled with S-K-I-N, though, or is it spelled differently?
I think it's S-K-I-N, maybe an E on the end. And lately I've been using bullet journals and mostly journaling instead of drawing as much, and the paper is a lot thinner. So if you flip the page, you can see the drawing through the other side. So if you
pros and cons.
Yeah, pros and cons. So yeah, there's little things like that. We can, it's a fun thing to get into, and also you can geek out about the tools, right? You can have little pencils and pencil
I've never done that
sharpeners
myself.
No, geeking out
over tools?
No.
You're my favorite tool, though.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, so I was trying to segue into a challenge for you guys. Like, hey, you don't need to do 365. Just start something small. I think a week is a good thing, and you can always add on to it, right? And see how it makes you feel, see what you think. But maybe for you, that's illustrating, and maybe you've never drawn before. And maybe we could have a little mini course on teaching you guys how to draw, and maybe we do that through some sort of live sessions where we're all learning together. You can all have your questions, and we can shift and we can answer, and we can help everything you're going, because fortunately for you guys, we have a resident artist here at the company, and he actually, I don't know, you taught about that once or twice before?
Yeah, for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And then, other things, I was just thinking about notebooks. I used to just make my own. And so that's something else that we could get into at some point.
Like you like went and chopped down a tree, and then you like milled the paper down, then
it took a couple of years, but finally ended up with like one nice sheet of paper.
Nice.
And then I probably ruined it by trying to draw on it.
Yeah. So we're gonna end up having a lot of links. Some of them are going to be here today. Some of them will be here in the future as we start to do more of what we're going to do. The interesting thing and the exciting thing about the company Helpful for Life is, right now, it's kind of like a choose your adventure. And frankly, like, depending on what you, the audience, the people who are actually listening to this, want to do and want to learn most, you can help steer the ship right now. And it's not going to be this way forever. So as we start to come up with these more ideas of like, oh, hey, we could do a course on this. Oh, we could teach lessons on this. If any one of these things is like, hey, that really interests me, and I'm willing to pull out my wallet and pay some money for that, then you should contact us and let us know. You go to our website, helpfulforlife.com, and hit the Contact Us button in the top right, which, fun fact for you, about a week ago, our producer said, hey, there's no button in the top right of the website. I'm like, episode funny. 80. Okay, well, good thing to know.
Now we know.
Yeah,
all these people have been going up there just randomly.
Right. There is a Contact Us. It just didn't have the button up there. So I finally added that.
Okay.
So people can do that. You can also comment on whatever platform you're on. Right now, we're on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook, and soon we'll be getting on some other platforms as well, including the podcasting platforms. That's been a to-do for a while for us, and one of the reasons we haven't updated is because we have a back catalog of non-titled, non-described episodes, and just trying to get that wrapped up so we can get it packaged in a way for you guys to easily browse and watch those things. So keep your eyes peeled. Well, I guess for podcasts, keep your ears peeled for that one.
Yeah, you'll see the little thumbnail come up, and then you can peel your ears.
Peel your ears. Vegetable peeler. If you need a vegetable peeler, click on the link. I'm just kidding.
Bells peel.
All right, so just the very quick recap. We talked with our friend Caylena, who's an entrepreneur. She did a 365 project where she did different illustration each day. And one of the big things for her was not making it too big of a thing, not making it need to have all these boxes that she needed to check. Just the fact that, hey, you did some sort of illustration. And some days, as you guys saw here, that was just like a light sketch with the pencil. Other days, it was very fully finished. It had colors, it had watercolors, it had a script, quote written into it and things like that. And that was kind of the beauty of her giving herself the time and the space to do it. You know, there's a lot of ways to create more things, and there's a lot of ways to create good things, right? And one of them is repetition, right? Some people say, hey, maybe by the time you do, I don't know, 80, 81 of something, you start to figure it out a little bit. Yeah. You know, and for those of you like, what does that mean? You'll just have to figure that one out. But yeah, so we talked about that. We talked a little bit about how she got into travel and about how she made one decision as a kid where she decided to learn French just because her sister learned Spanish. And so it's like, hey, just because I want to be different, I chose to do that, and it affected her life in a lot of ways. And now she's gone to France, and now she's a trilingual, which is a cool word to say. And for those of you who want to know the stems on that one, tri means 3, lingual means tongue or like language, because we like to point out those stems every now and then. But yeah, any other big highlights that come up on the top of your head?
Oh no, I think we could keep talking about all sorts of things forever with Caylena.
Yes. And there's your testimonial right there, Caylena. I think we could keep talking about things forever with Caylena. She's quite the conversationalist, and I know for a fact that she talks with people all across the world in all different languages. Sometimes even with some interesting love stories with people in Colombia, which I think we're going to have to hear about some other day when she's more comfortable talking about it, but maybe not. You'll have to tune back in, and you'll have to let us know if that's something you guys want to hear, and maybe she'll come back. But with that, ladies, gentlemen, dogs, camels, horses, whoever is listening, Ryder's mom.
Seahorses.
Yeah,
my mom.
Fun fact about seahorses, actually.
Oh, no.